Welcome to today's program, Voyage of the St. Louis, co-sponsored by Library Services here at the Library of Congress and the Library of Congress Professional Association Hebrew Language Table. The program is presented today in honor of the 75th anniversary of the sailing of the St. Louis and in honor of Jewish American Heritage Month. We have one of the passengers from the St. Louis with us today, Eva Wiener, sitting right there. And I'm wondering whether there are any other passengers or families of passengers that are here with us today, and if so, could you stand? So just Eva, oh, there's another one. Thank you. I would also like to thank a few people. Mishlin Amir from the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, who's the reason this program is here today. She arranged the speakers and had the idea for the program. Roberta Schaefer, Associate Librarian of Congress. Beecher Wiggins, our ABA Director. Audrey Fisher and the staff of the Public Affairs Office. Sue Vita in Music Division, who let us have the wonderful Whitall Pavilion. And Galina Teverovsky of the IJ section. Also, of course, Marvin Kalb and our panelists, Martin Goldsmith and Diane Afoumado. I will be stepping aside as soon as I introduce Mr. Kalb, and he will take over the program. Marvin Kalb spent 30 years as an award-winning reporter for CBS News and NBC News. He's written or co-authored 11 nonfiction books and 2 fiction books. And he's currently working on a new book, The Soviet Spring, The Rise and Challenge of Putin's Russia. He's a non-resident senior fellow with the foreign policy programs at Brookings and is a senior advisor to the Pulitzer Center on Crisis Reporting. He focuses on the impact of media and public policies and politics, and is an expert on national security with a focus on U.S. relations with Russia, Europe, and the Middle East. And it is with great pleasure I introduce Marvin Kalb. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail, very much, and thank you all for coming to this program. Very quickly to set the stage, Hitler came to power in Germany in 1933, and 5 years later, in the fall of 1938, there was the Kristallnacht, when the Nazis decided to destroy as best they could as many Jewish shops and synagogues as they could in Germany. And the German Jews got the message very quickly. Many of them had the message earlier. And they decided that it would be good to get out. And more than 900 of them managed to get on the St. Louis, and I noticed the title here, Voyage of the St. Louis, and of course that entire journey has been written about in a book and a movie as the Voyage of the Damned, and that is probably an understatement, because they never were able to land in Cuba. Their destination had to go back, and roughly, I don't know the exact numbers, 2/3 of them somehow managed to survive World War II. A third of them did not. So when they could not land in Cuba, they went back to their deaths at different times and in different places. We're really privileged to have 2 people who know about this subject and will talk to us about it. One of them is Martin Goldsmith, to my left. Martin is the host and classical music programmer for Symphony Hall on Sirius XM satellite radio, and he hosted NPR's Performance Today from 1989 to 1999. He's the author of 2 books. The first, The Inextinguishable Symphony. He can tell you about that. I hope he will. And the second is Alex's Wake, which has to do with his grandfather and uncle, who were 2 of the more than 900 on the St. Louis. Also joining us today, Dr. Diane Afoumado. She received her PhD and MA in Contemporary History from the University of Paris in Nanterre. She had a fellowship at the Holocaust Museum. She has written extensively on this subject, and she's conducted research especially on the St. Louis Odyssey through the eyes of Captain Schroeder, who was the captain of the boat, the St. Louis. And I would like to ask Dr. Afoumado to start first, and then Martin to pick it up after that. Please, Doctor.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I want to thank the organizer. Thank you, Gail, for putting this program together. And thank you. I want to really thank my colleague and dear friend, Micheline Amir, for organizing this. So I'm going to present a PowerPoint to you and try to summarize in 20 minutes the whole story of the St. Louis. So please, if you have any question, I can talk more about the St. Louis at the end. So, first of all, I want to say a few words about the Jewish population in Germany and in the Reich in general just before World War II. The Jewish population in Germany before the war was about 1% of the total population of Germany. And as you know, you mentioned this already, but as you know, the Jewish refugees fled Germany mostly, half of them, mostly between 1938 and 1939, and especially after the Evian Conference, and you can see one of the photographs of the Evian Conference there on the PowerPoint, the Evian Conference in July 1938 that basically tried to solve the problem of the refugee crisis, but it ended up being sort of a failure, and I'm going very fast here because there was a lot to say about the Evian Conference, but roughly in 1938 and 1939 there were not many options for the refugees and for the Jews, and they could go mostly to Shanghai and Cuba, and you can imagine that when you were a Jew from Germany or Austria, let's say the Reich in general, that was probably not your first choice, Shanghai or Cuba. But that was the only choice you basically had when you were thinking of massive immigration. I'm not talking about individual immigration, I'm talking about really a large number of people fleeing Germany. So before I start really telling you the whole story, I want to say a few words about the Hapag company that owned the St. Louis boat. The Hapag company was not the only company at that time. In the 1930s, there were many others. The Hapag company was German, but there were many other companies in France or Great Britain, the Netherlands, and most of them actually carried Jews on board, Jews who were trying to flee Germany in 1938 and 1939. What I'm trying to say is that the Hapag company was not the only one, and the refugee crisis really touched all those companies of cruise liners at the end of the 1930s. The Hapag was created in 1847, and it was mostly a commercial fleet that was totally destroyed during World War I and rebuilt afterwards, and reached its golden age in the 1920s. So imagine, this company that was really that had a lot of boats, a lot of vessels, a lot of luxurious liners, and the St. Louis was one of the most luxurious boats at that time. What is interesting is that in order to emigrate to Cuba in the 1930s, at the end of the 1930s, you needed a lot of documents. I'm not going to go through the whole list, but it was actually a lot of documentation that you had to gather in order to be able to enter the country, let alone, buying the boat, the ticket on the boat. So this is an example of the immigration identification card of one of the St. Louis passengers, and basically most of the St. Louis passengers had what we call a landing permit. This is not a visa per se, and this is a good document. This is totally a legal document, but this is not a visa. And but just remember that term, landing permit, because that's what most of the passengers had. This is a photograph of some of the passengers boarding the St. Louis, and I really like this photograph because it gives me a chance to tell you more about the passengers themselves and the world that they are